What's up, guys? D-Rock1992 here. For this video, I'm going to do another About entry in my About series. This is going to be bands. And this band in particular that I'm going to be talking about is going to be retiring at the end of this year. So I thought I'd talk about them. They're one of the better... they're definitely one of the best bands of the 80s. And they've made a nice little, I would say, comeback. The band I'm going to talk about, Motley Crue. Motley Crue is the definition of the three basics of rock and roll. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Because Motley Crue lived that life for a long time. They were heavily into drugs. Probably had unbelievable amounts of sex. And the rock and roll, of course, speaks for itself. So definitely I want to talk about them. They're just a very good band. They've made quite an impact with their heavy hitting type of music. They definitely were one of the best of the 80s, for sure. You can definitely put Bon Jovi up there, as I'll be talking about them for sure in another video, but Bon Jovi you can put up there. You could put Poison up there. You could put Iron Maiden up there. Def Leppard. Def Leppard, one of the best. Motley Crue, definitely deserves mention as one of the best of the 80s. So Motley Crue formed in 1981, and they had the original members, and the members that are still there today are vocalist Vince Neil, guitarist Mick Mars, bassist Nikki Sixx, and the drummer Tommy Lee. And Tommy Lee, probably outside of Motley Crue, is best known for the sex tape he made with Pamela Anderson, his wife at the time. But anyway, not here to talk about that. I am going to be talking about Motley Crue, of course. They started on the what's called the Sunset Strip in California. They kind of got their musical flow going. They got their chops in that Sunset Strip. And their first album, studio album, was Too Fast for Love. And this one, it came out in 1981, the same year they formed. And it made a little bit of an impact, not much of one. It definitely isn't considered one of their best. It did go platinum in the United States, and went number 77 on the Billboard 200. Not the greatest of debuts, but they got their music out there. One of their popular songs off that album is the song Livewire, which is definitely one of their most popular songs. I imagine it's played a ton at their concerts. But yeah, Livewire is one of their more popular ones. Piece of Your Action is another Motley Crue favorite as well. Too Fast for Love, I think I've heard that one. I think it's a favorite as well. And yeah, basically that's kind of all there is to say about that album. It started Motley Crue's career for sure, and they got enough popularity where they came out with 1983 Shout at the Devil. The second, often, and I've said this before, often it is very hard. It's easy to make your first album. It's very difficult to come up with a second album that's as good as the first. Any follow-up albums to, like, big-time successful albums, It's hard to do, but Motley Crue did it with 1983 Shout at the Devil. It went 4 times platinum, and it went to number 17 on the Billboard 200, so that was a good, pretty solid showing on the charts. Shout at the Devil, obviously the title song, Shout at the Devil, is definitely one of their most popular songs for sure. It is featured, in fact, on Guitar Hero 2. I know this because I own the game. I used to own the game, and I'd play it a couple of times. But you have a lot of other favorites. Looks That Kill, that's a popular one. The music video for Looks That Kill is weird. It's an 80s music video, you can tell that much. An interesting thing here, they did a cover of the Beatles' Helter Skelter. I don't know if I've ever heard that one. I probably have, but I just find it interesting. One of the best bands in the world, basically. One of the greatest bands ever, the Beatles. And Motley Crue covers them. Excuse me. Too Young to Fall in Love. That's the one I was thinking about. I was thinking it was one on the first album, but Too Young to Fall in Love Anyway is definitely a well-known Motley Crue song. Not as well-known as some of their big hits, but definitely up there. So yeah, Shout at the Devil was their second album. What could they do, basically, to expand on it? They come out with 1985's Theater of Pain. It also goes 4 times platinum, and it jumps up the charts to number 6. So it definitely is up there as a successful album. Smoking in the Boys' Room, one of their most popular hits, which is actually a cover, believe it or not. I don't think a lot of rock and roll fans kind of know that it is actually a cover of it's a band called Brownsville Station did the original song, and they definitely did that, and it's a good cover. Definitely, it's a very good cover song. Home Sweet Home, another one that was very popular. Home Sweet Home is kind of a power ballad. Their power ballad. A lot of rock bands have their own power ballads. Aerosmith, Kiss, for example. And so those two singles right there really, they're the only 2 singles. They really put Theater of Pain as a good album for Motley Crue. Their 4th effort was Girls, 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 the song about strippers. 1987 it came out. It hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, and I believe that the only reason it did not... It went 4 times platinum, by the way, and hit number 2. I believe the only reason why it did not hit number 1 was because of Michael Jackson's Bad. Michael Jackson's Bad, if I'm not mistaken, was released that same year in 1987. Oh wait, maybe not. I was wrong. Whitney Houston. Her second album debuted at the top of the charts, but number 2's not bad at all on Billboard. But yeah, Girls, 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 of course, the title track, the popular song, the song about strippers. In the music video, they just go to a strip club, and they have a ball there, basically. Kind of a song about excess in some different ways. But But yeah, Wild Side, another popular song from them. Yeah, Wild Side, definitely a popular song. Um, and another single off that album was "You're All I Need," which I don't know if I've heard of before, but Wild Side and "Girls, Girls, Girls" are the popular tracks off that album. And like I said, it was a big success. Definitely a big success. Definitely one that was probably "Girls, Girls, Girls" or the next album were breakouts. But the fifth studio album was Dr. Feelgood, and that came out in 1989. And this, I think, I think there are people that consider Dr. Feelgood to be their breakout album. It went 6 times platinum. I think it's their best-selling album, if I'm not mistaken. It hit number one, their first number one on the Billboard 200 for a studio album. But Dr. Feelgood, definitely a big-time success. It is Motley Crue's best-selling album, and it is very much regarded as as the best album that Motley Crue released. And there's definitely a lot of big songs on it. Dr. Feelgood, the title track, which is one of my favorite Motley Crue songs. Kickstart My Heart. It is the story about Nikki Sixx got an overdose on a drug overdose. Nikki Sixx. He got a drug overdose, but he was dead. He was declared clinically dead for about a couple of minutes before being revived by cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The stuff they do, like clear, stuff like that. So he wrote the song about his experiences with that, which I think is very neat. And out of that experience right there, he could have died from the drug overdose, but he didn't. And out of that experience, he came up with one of the best Motley Crue songs of all time, which is "Kickstart My Heart." It's one of my favorites, definitely. It's absolutely one of their best ones. "Without You," I think is one that is popular. "Same Old Situation," SOS. That's a good song from them. "Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away" is another song that was released as a single. There are 5 total for Dr. Feelgood, the ones that I mentioned. And it definitely was. It's hard to say it was a breakout album, actually, because the albums or so, the last couple albums that I mentioned were ones that definitely put them on the map. Shout at the Devil, their second album, put them on the map. The first one did okay, but the second one really showed, hey, these guys are for real. And definitely, it showed them that they were there. And Dr. Feelgood, more than anything, Dr. Feelgood definitely solidified them as one of the best bands of the 80s. They deserve to be in that. They deserve to be in that conversation of best band of the 80s for sure. They may not be the best, but they deserve to be in that conversation. Anyway, it would take a few years for them to come out with another album. But their 6th studio album came out in 1994. It was Motley Crue. How original. But it was disappointing because it only went gold as compared to their other albums. And the thing was about Motley Crue was that Nikki, let me see here, Vince Neil, the lead singer, he left the band. Dr. Feelgood was his last album that was, that was it. It was his last album that, can't talk. Dr. Feelgood was the last album that Vince Neil did the lead singing on until he left the band, and John Corabi took over for him on vocals. This was the only album that Corabi did, and it definitely, I don't think a lot of Motley Crue fans liked him because he replaced such a legend in Vince Neil. I mean, the guy, he just speaks for himself. He has one of the best voices in rock and roll. One of the most recognizable voices in rock and roll. And to have a guy replace him, a lot of fans don't like change. And you can say that for, not just for music, but for anything, really. Fans are resistant to change. And with John Corabi, he replaced a legend in Vince Neil, and there was some backlash, definitely. And the album itself did not do as well. Definitely not. It did release a couple of singles. I've never heard of these before because I've never listened to any of the songs on the Corabi album. Honestly, I would like to someday. Hooligan's Holiday and Misunderstood were the couple albums that they released. It did hit number 7 on the Billboard 200, though, and it went gold, so it sold about 500,000 copies. That's what it means. It sold about 500,000 copies. But it, compared to all their other big-time successes, this one is a dud. Simple as that. 1997, they come out with Generation Swine, the 7th studio album. This one also goes gold and hits number 4 on the Billboard 200, but Vince Neil does return after his, so it does include Vince Neil. He comes back. However, Tommy Lee leaves the band. The drummer, Tommy Lee, does leave the band, unfortunately. And he actually, this was... it was the last album to include Tommy Lee. So this was the last one with Tommy Lee until later on, and I'll be talking about that. But yeah, it went number 4, but it only did go gold, the Generation Swine album. Couple singles released from it, a song called Afraid and the song called Beauty. I have never heard any of the songs on this album. I've listened to a lot of their 80s stuff and their newer stuff. In between, I've never really listened to any of that. But I'd like to someday, definitely. The next album after that was 2000. It was an album called New Tattoo. And it didn't chart at all. And it hit number 41 on the Billboard 200. So definitely a disappointment compared to even their lower albums. Tommy Lee did leave the band. And he was replaced by Randy Castillo, who was originally an Ozzy Osbourne's drummer. The Ozzy Osbourne, the solo Ozzy Osbourne. And so it was a bit of a change there, but obviously the change didn't do anything really about it, because it didn't chart. And there were only a couple singles released. I mean, Hell on High Heels and New Tattoo were the two big singles released off this album. It was their 8th effort. and unfortunately, it just didn't do very well. So, probably because of that, Motley Crue didn't come out with anything for a while. Between 2000, for most of the 21st century, they've toured. They've done a lot of tours. They've released some live albums. I, in fact, saw a live album, Carnival of Sins. I actually saw that on TV. They taped it on VH1 Classic. I actually did see that. And it was a very good concert, definitely. They came out with that in 2006. And their latest studio album, the ninth and latest studio album, came out in 2008. So Motley Crue fans had to wait 8 years for a new album. And Saints of Los Angeles came out in 2008. It hasn't charted in the U.S. at all. Well, actually, it hasn't had a gold certification. But I think a lot of people think that for this band, for them, it was kind of a comeback for them in some ways. Because I do think a lot of people, I do think there were people that kind of like this album. The title track on Saints of Los Angeles is definitely it's a very good song, and I think one of the only ones I've heard off the album itself. There were 2 other singles, Motherfucker of the Year and White Trash Circus. But Saints of Los Angeles definitely a main thing. The main song off the album. And I'm seeing that it is actually the final. It will be the final studio album from Motley Crue. Because I don't think... So I think that they're coming... I thought that they were coming out with another album before they retired. Let's see. Let's see. So they've talked a little bit about... so they basically talked a little bit about the possibility of their 10th studio album. I had done some research before on it, and I think Tommy Lee said that they were going to release Motley Crue, they were going to release an EP, which, an extended play, which would have like 6 or 7 songs, something like that. It typically has around that total or less, definitely. An LP's a longer play. The LPs are the ones I mentioned, the albums I mentioned with Motley Crue. But they were talking about an extended play. Either way, I hope they come out with something new. I really do. I really like their music. I am a fan of Motley Crue for sure. And actually, they're going to be done. They're going to end at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, or at the Staples Center, rather, on December 30th and December 31st of this year. They are actually going to be ending. They're going to have their final 2 concerts at the Staples Center. The Staples Center is the home of the Lakers, I want to say. Oh, the Lakers and the Clippers. And the Los Angeles Kings of the NHL. And a few other teams as well. But yeah, they're going to be ending at the Staples Center at the end of this year. And it will be the end of a great career, definitely. Which is sad, but I think they wanted to end while they were on top. the Saints of Los Angeles album, even though it didn't chart, it kind of said that they were back. It kind of told Motley Crue fans this band was back. Now they had suffered. I mean, a lot of the bandmates, all the band members, suffered from drug and alcohol abuse. Like I said, the drugs definitely were a big part of Motley Crue. You knew them as much for their excesses as you knew them for their music. All the bandmates had been in jail, had been in prison. Tommy Lee, I know, was in prison. Vince Neil served some time, and Mick Mars right now has a condition where he has like arthritis of some sort, so it's difficult for him to play. He's the bassist, no, the guitarist, and so it's kind of difficult for him to play. But I mean, the band also is getting up there in age, so maybe they don't want to go out there and tour all the time anymore. I mean, maybe they just don't have it in them. But I think the big thing is they're going out on top. There's still generations of fans today are finding out about Motley Crue. From the 80s, from the 90s, from the 2000s. They're still a viable band. They're still out there, and they still get a lot of people. They have a lot of fans. They get a lot of people during their concerts. It definitely is that way. And this band's kind of they're unique because for the majority of their career they've had all four members, the four founding members, except for the couple that I mentioned. They've had the members for a long time. They've had their four members for most of their history. You can't say that about a lot of bands, in the way that bands break up and things like that. Stuff happens. Bands break up because of creative differences and fights and stuff like that. And well, Motley Crue didn't do it as much as other bands. So with all that said, that is pretty much it for my Motley Crue video. I think they're going to go down in history as one of the best. They're classified as glam metal, and they were glam metal in the 80s. Glam metal meaning that they had the big hair, they had the makeup, and stuff like that. That's basically what glam metal was in the 80s, hair and makeup. Hair that was longer than a woman's, and makeup and all that. So that's essentially what it is. But they are a hard rock and heavy metal band for sure. And yeah, they're just going to go down in history as one of the best rock bands to come out of the 80s for sure. And one of the defining rock bands of that decade, and one of the defining rock bands of all time. So it's good to see them go out on top, for sure. We're going to miss them, but it's also good that they're ending on top and not... You see them not this way. You see them at a concert and they're like, oh, this band sucks. They're going out on top, and I commend them for that, definitely. So that's it for the Motley Crue video. D-Rock 1992 out.